kommt aus der Zukunft. Ich habe ihm nicht geglaubt.
Wenn du es gewusst hast, warum hast du es dann nicht verhindert?
Ich wusste nicht, dass er sich das Leben nimmt.
Aber du hättest Mikkel retten können.
Ich habe jetzt noch eine Oma und die ist Direktorin an meiner Schule.
Ihr Mann, der nebenbei meine Mutter fickt, sucht seinen Sohn, der mein Vater ist.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
No. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
There's nothing to fear except God. Whatever that means to you.
Do I look like someone who cares what God thinks? Why do I say this? Because we got Holy Ghost power!
You're listening to a podcast exploring faith and fear, what scares us and what saves us. This is the fear of God.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fear of God podcast. Feels like we have been doing this for a very long time. My name is Reed Lackey. We have been podcasting to you for 33 years, bringing to you all of the wonderful stories at the intersection of faith and give me a minute. Faith and fear, and so typically with me, typically with me is one Mr. Nathan Rouse, but he's not here today. I don't know what he's gone to do. He's off doing something. I don't know what that man does most of the time. He's a strange one, that Nathan Rouse, but I do have some other guests with me. I figure, you know what? Talk to myself all the time. Why don't I just go ahead and talk to myself right now? So why don't you come over here and why don't you introduce yourself to the people?
Hi, my name is Reed Lackey, and while we wait for Nathan Rouse to get back, we would like to ask you to go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and a review. It would help us out a lot and help other people find the show, and it would mean a lot to us. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Reed. That was very, very good, and I appreciate that. And, we have somebody else here. Hi, what was your name?
Oh, I'm Reed. It's really nice to meet you. So yeah, while we're waiting for, the three of us are sitting here waiting for, Nathan, there you are. Hi, buddy.
TikTok, TikTok, TikTok. I don't even know how to reply to this. That was amazing.
Oh man, so I want to say a very, very special thank you to my son for filling in for me. Say hi to everybody.
Young Reed, who is more or less 33 years younger than you.
Yes, that is give or take a year. Yes, that is actually correct.
And we do want to welcome Old Man Reed to the show.
Thank you very much. I'll be making appearances throughout the course of the conversation. Sorry, my bad.
This, so that would mean 72. Yeah, maybe. But Old Man Reed, you sound a little older than just 33 years older than regular Reed.
Life's hard. I just, it's been difficult.
It's been a tough time.
It has been. Things don't get easier, y'all. I'm just letting you know. I'm just telling you right now from here, just enjoy your youth while you got it.
Or are you 107-year-old Reed?
Last time I got checked, I forget exactly what they told me, but it was, I'm sorry, I just got distracted. I don't know what
it happens.
Was.
It happens.
It does. Yeah, more often than I'd like.
I'm sure. Well,
what are we doing again?
Come back and visit us sometime, old man Reed.
I will. I'm gonna go to bed.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Yeah. You go off. You go over there.
Woo-wee.
This is theater of the mind, right
It
here.
is.
So,
It is.
Listeners don't know, or maybe they can guess. I gave you no prep for that whatsoever.
You didn't. You didn't.
I just figured.
Hey,
I
appreciate the commitment. Proud of you. I'm impressed that you're a good man, Reed.
Thank you kindly, Si. Hey Nathan, how's it going, buddy? So we are, if listeners haven't been able to pick up on it, we are in this final episode of Phase 1 of #Speaking in Tongues, our devoted series on foreign language horror material. We have been covering, we covered 4 films. We covered Qui-Gon last week. The week before that, we covered A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. The week before that, Eyes Without a Face, featuring our foreign correspondent Vera Gowdy. And then launching the series was the Korean film The Wailing. This has been, I don't know about you, but I feel really, really happy with all of the conversations that have happened. I think that this has been a really fun series. And I mean, we've been teasing it, but I'm excited for when Phase 2 finally comes in, which will be rather imminent. I'm excited.
Yes, and I did want to read, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you, as of this recording, have gotten your campaign t-shirt yet, but just a reminder, 2 weeks ago, we unveiled to the world the brand new Jacob Hunt Frankenstein 2020 brand new campaign art for Frank and Nathan and Dr. Readinstein as co-presidents of all of the world, you know.
It's a glorious thing. Well, I tell you, as of this recording, I have not yet purchased it. But if you're hearing this right now, I would like to make you aware that if you're hearing this on launch day, this is my birthday. So you are more than welcome to.
You're
more than welcome to send it. This is my birthday.
It's your birthday.
Yes. So
happy birthday!
Yes. Thank you.
Look at
Thank
there.
you very much. Yeah, and in true dark fashion, you're telling me happy birthday like time travel early. It's pretty awesome. Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you now.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like you're telling me now, but as
right
the listeners
now
listen to this,
is
then
October.
Wow.
What was he saying? I don't understand.
Oh boy. But yes, no, I didn't want to steal your thunder there. Yes, so the campaign Franken, Nathan, and Readinstein 2020 is up there. We've got a pretty nice little T Public presence right there. I'm very proud of our little shop. It's nice. If you have not yet purchased your merchandise, perched your merch, as we like to say around here, then please.
I don't know what you like
means,
to say. I like to say make a merch purge. You know,
merch purge. Well, I just like to invert things that you do. You know, like you say hello. I
you
say,
know, like
oh,
if you're in a house of worship on Sunday morning, you could get out your phone. It'd be rude, but you could get out your phone and make a merch purge at church. You know.
Ooh. And then if there's a tree outside, you might be able to make a merch perch at church with a birch.
And you know, if you know your neighbor is watching the Addams Family on their phone, you could make a merch perch at church with a birch while watching Lurch. You know.
That's true. That's true. And then if there's an electrical storm.
What?
If there's no, that one doesn't really work.
I don't know where you're going. Where were you going?
If there was an electrical storm, then you can make a merch perch at church, buy a birch with lurch, and then there's a surge.
Oh, what?
You know, like
dark.
I
get it.
I don't know. You know,
a search. Yeah, I get it. Like a search engine. Like you Google it.
Right.
Speaking of Google tpublic.com. Go plug in the Fear of God podcast and perch your merch.
Mm-hmm.
Make a merch
with
perch.
lurch, or birch or any other.
Oh my gosh. We had a 2-hour plus episode last week. We can't do that again this week.
We can't do that right now.
Our constant listeners are going to be not quite so constant.
That is true. That is true.
So yes, you said, what did you just say? Your birthday is October 1st with Lurch.
Yes, it is. It is.
Merch perch.
So
you don't have your shirt yet, but you know, go get a shirt. Portions of those proceeds are going to go to support the Florence Project. We would love for you, constant listeners, to do that. You will have the opportunity again in Phase 2 in November to re-engage that idea. But please, get you a shirt, get a candidate shirt. We'd love, as we did with the first round of merch, to post those pictures of you guys. Additionally, don't forget Comfort in the Creepy. Post pictures of your home's decor.
Indeed.
It is October now. As of when this recording releases, this is too much dark, man. When this recording releases, it's October, Reed. It's your birthday. My birthday's next week. My birthday, your birthday. It's the podcast birthday. Yeah. So, just post pictures of Comfort in the Creepy. Do you want to tell them about our series between Phase 1 and 2 of Speaking in Tongues?
Yes. So in between now and the next phase of hashtag Speaking in Tongues, we're doing something that we've been pitching to you for quite some time. If you have not already voted, then sadly you missed your mark. You missed your opportunity. But we will be, as we have the past 2 Octobers, we will be counting down your favorite horror films from the decades. So we did the 90s at first, and then we did, last year we did the 80s. This year, starting next week, we're going to be counting down your top 50 horror films of the 1970s. Hashtag I love the 70s. So check that out. We're going to be, normally we do like 5 episodes, and we are count down like 10 per. This week, obviously, this is October 1st, and so we weren't able to start with that right now, but next week we will be counting down your number 50 down through your number 31, and we will be covering an episode from your top 10. So stay tuned to the social media feeds for that. Sadly, if you missed the voting, then still check out the podcast. There are some iconic films of the 70s, and I think you're really going to enjoy that series. And then after that, following October, we will be right back with more of hashtag Speaking in Tongues. Very exciting things on the horizon. I'm very, very excited for it.
Yes. I love the 70s. That's going to be fun.
Mm-hmm.
And, Reed, before we get too far into the caves of Windon, I actually, funny enough, I had a guest ready to go too.
You did? You did?
Just hang on just a second.
Oh.
It's okay. It's okay. Come on over. Just take your time. What you watching? What you reading? What are you listening to? Is that okay? Yeah,
It's my old friend. Hey, buddy.
Oh my God. Wow. People were digging the Dark series until this episode. It's like
now they're like, this
they
is
came to finish the season, and they're like, oh my God, these
this
dudes
is ridiculous.
These
I'm
dudes
not
are
doing this
idiots.
for 2 hours.
So Reed, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know. Now I don't know if you have other things. I don't. I've just got one.
No,
but ours is a mutual.
Yes, indeed. Actually, I did have one small thing, but I actually will defer to our mutual, because I think I know what you're going to mention, and I want to talk about that more.
Well, Dark's cycle of 33 years is echoed by another major sort of genre franchise's cycle of 27 years that second iteration of which just released 2 years after its first volume, and that of It Chapter 2.
Exactly. So, full disclosure, ladies and gentlemen, we've both seen this, obviously. We're both going to chat about it for a moment, but we're going to probably withhold some of our more substantive thoughts, because I think, Nathan, if you recall, we had for A Quarterly King, when It Chapter 1, which was just called It at the time, when it came out, we got the Losers Club together.
We did.
All of our podcast friends, which have now become somewhat recurring favorites for the Quarterly Kings that we have. So we are planning on the horizon to get the Losers Club back together in true fashion, and all of us discuss It Chapter 2 together. But in general, what did you think of It Chapter 2?
Well, what's good to know, Riri, in all your various chronological iterations, is that I am excited to reconvene the Losers Club for the opportunity at that point in time, which will be this year, by the way, constant listener.
Yes.
It'll be a little bit, but it will be this year. The opportunity to rewatch It Chapter 2, because right now, and we established last week with Quiet On that context is everything. But right now, I am not a fan of it. Chapter 2.
Yeah. Understood.
Do you though? I don't think you
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I do. I mean, I disagree, but I understand.
Can you disagree with me not being a fan of a thing? Like, is that a thing that can be disagreed with? You can disagree with potential takes that may be drawn out of it, but my conclusion is simply I don't like a thing. Like,
no,
like
I think you're more a fan than you think you are.
if I said I don't like Brussels sprouts, as a natural statement for you to say I disagree with you, Nathan? Like, well, it's not a thing.
In the list of strange conversations we've had on this show, this is rapidly rising. But no, like I think because if you said I don't like Brussels sprouts and I said, well, I do like Brussels sprouts, then my opinion disagrees with your opinion.
No, we're entering a semantic sort of state here where our opinions don't disagree with each other. Like because to say you disagree with me not liking Brussels sprouts is you challenging whether I like Brussels sprouts, not whether Brussels sprouts are inherently worth liking.
Oh, you know
what? See the distinction there?
If we could expand out these definitions, we could revolutionize the political landscape of America. Because what you just said about opinions don't disagree with each other, I think that's staggering information for 2019.
Actually, in this moment, I can't tell if you're being sarcastic or not.
This entire conversation, we're talking about whether or not you disagree about Brussels sprouts. Like, yes,
no. But the foundation we're trying to build here is having an opinion itself a thing to disagree with, or is simply the opinion a reflection of how you feel about a piece of whatever. I'm saying I don't appreciate currently Chapter 2. You're saying you disagree with me.
Okay. So let me say it this way. Shut up.
Yes. Everyone meet Penny Lackey the dancing clown.
No, no, I mean, in all facetiousness aside, no. I mean, I hold a different opinion than yours.
Yes. Our opinions are counter to each other.
They are.
Yeah.
Where they would converge is I do feel that it is not as strong a film as the first installment. I think the degrees by which they are slightly inferior films would differ greatly in your assessment versus in mine. But I do feel like the first part is a stronger pound for pound film. And for a number of reasons that we'll probably get into when we unpack it with our friends. But yeah, I do feel like Chapter 2 did not, overcome the rabid affection that, Chapter 1 garnered. But I find myself a bit in the minority. A lot of people were somewhat lukewarm with it, if not actively disliking it. But I actively enjoyed it. I thought it was very much of a similar piece to the first one. I don't want to get into too many specifics, because the show's coming. But yeah, so we'll have the opportunity to unpack all that.
Sincerely, I don't care if we follow this rabbit trail for a second, but like at least how I perceived your degree of enthusiasm via text, at least, actually did surprise me. Not because I thought, what an idiot. No, just because.
You think that about other things, but
most things. No.
Wow.
I do think context matters. How I saw it may have affected somewhat, but I mean, I don't know how affectionate you were towards this performer beforehand, but I mean, Hader is great. Hader is the standout.
Oh, he's wonderful. Yeah.
I like what they do with his character. I may be in the minority there. I don't know, but
I like it quite a bit.
Well, we may be in the minority there. I don't know, but I disagree with your liking. I'm kidding. I appreciated that was something new added to the mix.
Sure.
I mean, again, I don't know. We can talk about it some more if you want.
I think the big takeaway when we last week and this week, I think the big takeaways are Nathan doesn't know how to watch movies because he watches movies in ways that don't. I'm teasing you. Oh my gosh! Listeners don't know that we're not watching each other right now. Like we're actually just
I can't see your sarcastic face.
So
I just hear your stupid mouth.
Just give me Godzilla. So, you walk out of every film from now until the end of time. Just give me Godzilla.
I mean, that was fine, I guess, but needed more kaiju, more
Oh
titans.
my god.
Well, I am thankful both It films exist. I love that they've made money. I think this King Renaissance or King, maybe it's not even Renaissance if that means resurgence. Like, I think his sort of popularity as a cultural contributor is just, kind of entering the stratosphere right now. And so that's exciting. It absolutely is exciting. I think the film, It Chapter 2, is a weak film with strong elements, but the film itself is pretty weak for me.
Gotcha. Yeah, I gotcha.
Regardless, do you have any other thoughts on It Chapter 2?
Well, a multitude, but I think we should save them for our actual episode. So stay tuned for that. It'll be in at least a couple of months, but stay tuned for an extended conversation about It Chapter 2 with some special guests. But in the meantime, that is another installment of
What You Watching? What are you reading?
What are we singing again?
I liked it.
Listening to
Oh my gosh. This episode had such promise. Like before, like right after you finished your intro, it was like, oh wow, this is going to be a great one. And now it's like, oh man, we got to dig out of this hole.
please, coming up for air. Invite your son back, please. This is going up for air.
Have him read off his cue cards as he so clearly was.
I think he did a great job.
Oh, he was fantastic. Read.
So
we are bringing it back. We don't have to do TV guideposts because we are in it. We are living it.
Oh yeah, this is
we are in the festering wound of Winden, Germany.
What's that? Oh, we still get the music. I love that. I love it so much.
I was like, what is he doing?
Wait, it's not done.
Oh, okay.
Don't talk. Don't talk. We're talking.
Okay. Oh, God.
Okay, now we're good. Now.
People have tuned out. I feel like constant listener as a phrase was just coined 2 weeks ago. We need to go ahead and retire it.
Now it's occasional tolerator. But
so we are bringing home season 1 of Dark. Netflix's Dark, discussing specifically episodes 9 and 10, the season as a whole, thematics, forecasts for what's coming next. Because as of this moment, Riri, we're caught up. Well, we are at, we're on the same sort of spot. Like I have no idea what's in season 2.
Exactly, because you came into this run of season 1 having seen season 1 before. I had never seen it. And so, so now we are on the same page. We have arrived at our same destination, however winding the Winden caves may have been for us. This is, So now I will say out the gate, and I think you experienced the same thing, I actively did not look up any trivial information for this episode because I did not want to accidentally stumble into spoilers for season 2. So I don't have any trivial bits, just because I was like, if I start reading about stuff even from season 1 or something, then I'm going to accidentally read something about that connects to season 2, and I just don't want to do that. When we do phase 2, I want to go in rather blind into season 2, because I've greatly enjoyed this experience. So
it's funny. I don't have trivia bits per se, but I did Google interviews and then specifically check the dates so that nothing was post season 2's release. And the wrap,
or was it?
Yeah. Or maybe someone went back in time and doctored this review. The wrap.com, W-R-A-P, had an interview with the two creators, and there's nothing super seismic about it, but they do highlight specifically from season 1, and this interview is from December of 2017.
Okay.
They highlight in season 1 the intentionality and the significance of Mikkel's passing through the cave and subsequently Gretchen, the dogs passing through the cave, with the the intentional note. They at the now again, I have no idea what changed between December 2017 and now. And if you follow the show, nothing changed. It all happened as it was supposed to. But the implications of this interview were there were active agents involved, agent or agents plural, in passing Mikkel through the cave, and the supposition was old Jonas, because Mikkel's disappearance is the catalyst for everything in 2019.
Right.
That he is the one who potentially abducts at the least, if not, kind of absconds with, steers, or forcibly gets in there, and that also old lady Claudia is who shepherds Gretchen the dog from 1953 to 2019, or I'm sorry, to 86, because it is 86 Claudia. Her discovery of Gretchen is what propels her into her whole journey.
Yes. Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
And I do. So what's interesting about it, I'm reluctant to give some of this away right now in the conversation, but you know what? For the sake of just honesty and just letting the conversation be what it is, I'll share it right now. So I'm gonna say right now that my experience of watching this and thinking about the different theories, connecting the dots, following the puzzle pieces, absorbing the clues, admiring the craft has been a real treasure. I really, really have enjoyed this experience. That having been said, I actively dislike the way that it ends. Now, we can get into some specifics about that if we want to
Let me ask you, because it's funny. I had no idea you were about to say that, but I was, as I am prone to do, had the impulse to interrupt you, but I chose not to. But are you referring to literally the ending, as in Jonas shunting forward?
Yes.
Okay. So
that's
yes.
the element and there's because in true dark fashion, every decision for something is a decision against something else. There are other buttons that I would have perhaps felt more satisfied seeing on the end of that still could have teased some other element, but I feel like it was the Jonas pushing forward in time, which I find fascinating, and I should say that I am very relieved to know that not only does a season 2 exist, it is available to us to watch whenever we see fit. But had I watched season 1 of Dark and watched it back in 2017, I personally probably would have felt very unsatisfied with that.
It's so funny that is your sort of experience, because I had the exact same feeling the first time through.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I remember, and once you know that that's where it goes, you're a lot softer to it. But I remember, because I was so wrapped up in the narrative as it was existing, that his jump forward felt like an abandonment of a lot of what I actually liked and found interesting.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's really fascinating. That was your sort of experience, because here's something to think about. Presumably, if any point of emergence for any traveler is a 33 cycle, what that kind of means. Again, I know nothing about the content of season 2, where it goes. But what that kind of means is Jonas in 19 shunts forward to what, 2052?
Yes, 33 years from 2019. You would presume that's 2052.
What that would then seem to mean, because spoiler alert, Reed was right 2 weeks ago. He was right last week, but he already knew. Yes, the hooded trenchcoat fella is the elder version of Jonas. But what that would then mean to me, and this is the first time this occurred to me, was this go round, is think about the fact that it's teenage Jonas who ports from 19 to 53 or 52, which means he theoretically lives until 2085, because the older version we have of him is an older version, not the teenage version recycled. Right. So I don't know. Again, I don't know what the implications of that are, but it was fascinating to me to ponder. Okay, because it stands to reason, and is very possible / probable, that 2052 teenage Jonas encounters elder versions of the kids he knew.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Versus,
yeah, I'm sure.
and all I'm trying to say there is simply, it's not like 19 Jonas shunts to 52 and suddenly becomes trenchcoat Jonas we know. Like that
right, exactly.
doesn't happen.
Yes.
Anyway,
Yeah.
long-winded way of saying I am with you. My first time through, it wasn't disappointment. There was so much storytelling felt like left to be done that another branch was unexpected and unwelcome is a strong word, but definitely like, okay. Kind of
right. Well, because I do feel like, okay, this is a bit of a side tangent. I'm going to try to not spend too long on it. So in the way that franchise publications of books, like series of books began to become, well, and I think still is somewhat the norm, where you get like the Hunger Games series and the Twilight series and these books that, like, when they come out, the endings of the books purposefully kind of propel, like, ooh, you're going to have to wait for the next book and you're going to have to pick up the next book.
Yep.
And in that sense, like, I've never been a very big fan of that model of sort of capsuled storytelling, because it feels so incomplete in and of itself. And what I'll say about this, season 1 of Dark is that's perhaps my only, if not my only, it is definitely my biggest complaint, is that I don't mind a cliffhanger ending. We're dealing with a TV series, especially like sitting here in my own version of 2019. I know that a season 2 exists. 2017 me would not have known a season 2 exists. But I can forgive it because I know that I will see more of the story. But when that happens, and it's not as if they wrapped up most of the disparate plot threads.
They wrap up
from
very
the
little.
different. Yeah, exactly. They wrap up so little and then leave us with a tease that the expansiveness of this world is so much bigger. And granted, now here's what's going to be fascinating to see. Like this right now, we have season 2 of it. Netflix has confirmed the renewal of Dark for season 3 and confirmed that it will be going into production. They know it will be the final season. So I'll be interested to see. I would imagine season 2 is going to end on a similar version of a cliffhanger, and hopefully season 3 will bring things to full fruition. And I think my issue is it does not need to, because I always go back and forth on this, hey, everybody, Lost reference. I always go back and forth on this when I defend Lost, where I'm like, there's the type of ending where it remains unresolved and the type of ending where they resolved a thing, but you did not like what they focused on. You did not care for the way they chose to.
Like in Lost, when they're all dead at the end.
Well, yes. Like
they were all dead the whole time, right? I mean, I can't.
Yes. When
that was so stupid.
When people say that, I throw up in my mouth a little bit because I'm like, you clearly are not paying attention.
It's like, as much as I want to be Christ-like and not an elitist human being, those moments sorely test that ability.
Nothing makes me lose my salvation more than people hating on the
hey, brother, you can't.
Lost.
You can't lose your salvation. But I know what you're saying. Hyperbolically.
But honestly, like, so what frustrates me about the ending of season 1 of Dark is, that it's not that they choose to focus on something different. It's that they actively, like, they end it on, like, the gun was pointed at him, he is knocked out, and you are knocked out of the show.
Right.
And so, like, it is and all of the people that were sitting or standing in certain places as this encroaching dark sphere is being created in the sky and in the room, and the portal opens up to connect Jonas with the 53 Helga, and so, like, all of those things happen. We get 0 on any of the aftermath of any of those characters, and instead what we get is Helga awakens, which you'd already seen. Helga awakens in 86, and Jonas awakens and exits the cave in presumably 2052. So yeah, it's a
but now your kind of take is appropriate for a first experience. Knowing where the show was going, paying closer attention to the breadcrumbs. One, from a purely just structural standpoint, I do, though I utterly, watch how this is going to work, agree with your opinion.
Wow.
That the initial take of the end of Dark One was a letdown. I'm less in that camp now, if only because, one, the machinations, the methodical nature of the plotting of season 1 makes me, one, just kind of trust, okay, while this is a pivot I was not craving, I'm sensitive enough to kind of give you the benefit of the doubt to see where you're wanting to take me.
Sure. And I can get on board with that.
Additionally, now there may come a point where this tips too far over for me and my affection for the show begins to wane. This is really possible. What I stated a couple weeks ago about the compelling nature of ordinary individuals encountering extraordinary circumstance. There could be a moment to come, again, I hope not, there could be a moment to come where your extraordinary circumstance just becomes giant mythology, tentpole storytelling, and thus the human aspect feels lost in that moment.
Sure.
So I'm sensitive to that, but it is worth noting that as the show, even season 1, progresses, the wider this world gets, the wider this story goes. So it's clear kind of the Noah and Claudia stories are opposing poles. So that's going to be, I would think, where we're headed. Where I'm going to land this sort of yes and to your initial take of the end of season 1 is the bunker is a significant geographical point for the series. And in 53, it's a nothing hole in the ground. It's a structure, but it's just a hole in the ground. In 86, it's the electric chair kids wallpaper room. In 2019, it's once more kind of a decrepit structure. However, in 52, it is where Jonas wakes up at and is the recurring imagery of the webbed photos.
Okay.
It is worth noting and I'm with you, however strong a feeling it is when that happens of, okay, this is anomalous to where we've been, the series starts on the wall of the 52 bunker. The first shot of the first episode is the webbed photos. You have no idea because you have no context for it at the time. Of the 52 bunker. So at the very least, there are some threads there that substantiate where season 1 ends. Again, I am with you and agree that my first take was exactly what you felt, which is, I didn't want that.
Well, and so what gives me even further sort of hope, now again, this is a what would be deemed a critical assessment. I have actively avoided reading anything about anything of season 2, with the one exception of I wanted to see, and the reason for the research is that when we were debating about whether or not to dive in the show, sort of an element was, well, let's see how season 2 is being received. So all I know, without any specifics, like no reviews, nothing like that, all I know is that percentage-wise, season 2 is being received even more positively than season 1 was. Yes. So
that's cool.
So again, that's that, and all I know of that is Rotten Tomatoes percentage-wise. So take that for what you will, but that does give me some hope that in their intentionality, which we observed getting here, this journey versus destination idea, that carries over into hopefully what will be a more substantial and richer and even more rewarding mythology that they are willing and bold enough to dive into and unpack for us. So yeah, that was a long-winded way of saying that I
like it.
Really enjoyed this journey. The destination pausing at season 1 left me a bit ambiguous, but it's encouraging both to hear that your rewatch gained esteem for even that ending, and as we've said ad infinitum, that there's a season 2 imminently approaching us, that literally following our October series, we'll be diving into season 2, which is exciting.
So let's dive into episode 9, which is called Everything Is Now. This might be one of my favorite episodes of the season.
Oh wow, yeah.
Mainly because there's two. You didn't use this phrase, so I'm gonna apply this phrase, but you, I think, would echo this phrase and alluded to this concept a few weeks ago with reference to Dark on the episode where Vera was present with us about the clues in a mystery story. You were comparing it to other mystery shows. What?
So I'll repeat that unless you have a different point to make. I can repeat that point for you because
I mean, I'm going to go a place with it, but feel free to reiterate if you want.
So just if listeners didn't listen to that or if they didn't catch that because they didn't see that film, the point that I made is what I love about the show is some shows that have a big mystery at their center lead you from conclusion to conclusion, which is basically just that they'll this person was really behind it, and then there's a fake out, and the next week it's really this thing going on, and blah, blah, blah. Dark actively resists that impulse and instead leads you from clue to clue without much commentary on how you are supposed to feel about said clues, and I really appreciated that.
Well,
anyway,
and my sort of pithy articulation of that is show, don't tell, and I think this series is fantastic at showing and not telling, and it's exemplified in two scenes in this episode. So I want to identify these two scenes, and we can talk about other aspects of the episode, but these two just stand out to me. Maybe one of my favorite moments of the entire first season, which is all I've seen at this point. And last week when we talked about 7 and 8, I was getting ahead of myself thinking this is what was coming. I from a film craft, from a storytelling, from a performance perspective, love the scene of Ulrich sitting by himself outside the bunker. It is so this broken and defeated, this shamefaced, grizzled, bloodied guy just sitting outside of this bunker that Helga is locked in, thinking he has achieved his goal.
Right.
And when I talk about show, don't tell, that moment, like if someone walked through the room, this is what I love about the show. If someone walked through the room and saw this really compelling, interesting character moment, it was like, what's going on here? The ability to unpack that moment is impossible. You're like,
right.
Don't even bother. Right. Don't ask me that. Like
it's too much.
It is, but it's so powerful because it's just showing you this character's experience of this moment. Not again. This is my interpretation of your conclusion versus clue thing. What was so problematic to me, I agree with you about those copycat Lost shows, was you'd get to the end of an episode and it's like, bum, 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 we're telling you this thing is important and significant and look at this thing. It's not letting me, the viewer, kind of journey with the character into the implications of the reveal, which is what this show is really great at.
Absolutely.
So that scene is really powerful to me. Another scene, and then we can kind of thread out from there, is I love the scene where it's Jonas and Martha in the rain. Like similar to Ulrich outside the bunker. This is the quintessential cinema young lovers moment, right? It's estranged but attracted to each other, lovely teenagers. It's in the rain. It's romantic. He's on his bike. They're
oh my gosh,
they're apart, but they're supposed to be together in traditional sort of, storytelling iconography. You even as the viewer kind of want them to be together, but Jonas knows and she doesn't, and it is a totally broken relationship because of it. But just as a constructed scene, it's it's all this traditional Romeo Juliet star-crossed lover kind of thing. And I love that scene. Again, I know it may feel like an odd one to highlight, but I just think it's such a powerful, like, she is trying to force information out of him that we even know as a viewer, like, he can't tell her this, no,
of course not. Oh my gosh.
It's a wild scene.
And that's what's so amazing about that. It's like you just made the statement in passing, he can't tell her this. What's so amazing about that is that not only would he be up against the incredulity that people would not believe him, but also that, like, it could possibly do damage and harm to reveal the information. It's just like, it's fascinating. This poor guy, this poor Jonas is stuck in, and I love the scene. I didn't even write it down. It's just coming to me in the moment. I cannot recall in the moment if it is in Everything Is Now or if it's in the finale, which is called Alpha and Omega, where he's speaking to older nurse Ines.
That's Alpha and Omega, but yeah.
Is it in Alpha and Omega? Okay. But I'll reference it here just because, this is the full episode and everything. But when he's going off about
so good.
all of the different things that, like, I have another grandmother and she's the principal of my school, and then he's talking about, that he kissed his aunt and everything, like, just psychologically speaking, this poor kid,
yeah,
like, it's just, it's a lot to try to wrestle down for him.
Well, and and remember too, what's so great about that, and yes, that is in 10, and we can kind of go wherever we want, but what's so great about that scene is it's powerful from the standpoint of, you watch shows like this sometimes with high genre conventions and wonder about the reality implications of them.
Yeah.
What I love in that moment is Jonas is just naming the absurdity. Like, this is unfathomable. And yet the value of that moment is he's charging her. He's like, you knew all this. And why did you not stop Mikkel from going in the cave? That's what's really powerful about that scene to me. But yeah, so what are some specific notes from 9 that stand out to you?
So, I mean, most of my sort of observations along the way are just just notating some specific scenes. I have 2 major notes from episode 9. The first one is the 9 is the first time it pinged for me, if it isn't the first major time that they just revealed it, just how much of a mastermind behind, or I shouldn't say mastermind, how much of a catalyst Claudia was to so many things that took place, like her setting Alexander/Boris to build the underground bunker, her setting the time scientist is what I wrote down for him, but the HG-10 house to actually building the time machine.
Well,
like, she is
yes, old lady Claudia. Yeah.
It's old lady Claudia, but the person of Claudia is so much a catalyst to so many things that happened, and so I noted that and thought that was interesting because prior to that there was a character that I was just like, huh, what, like she's background at best until you realize like how much influence she's had, and then I just wrote down Hannah is a terrible person.
Oh my gosh,
she's bordering on irredeemable narratively.
Yeah.
Like, not only does she accuse falsely Ulrich of one of the most devastating things a teenage boy could be accused of, but then she falsely implicates Regina as his accuser, as his false accuser. Then in 2019, she lies to Katerina about the nature of the beginning of and the ending of her affair with Ulrich. And then on top of that, then blackmails Alexander/Boris. The reason I keep calling him that is because, he had assumed a different identity. But she blackmails him to, quote unquote, destroy Ulrich. I mean, she's awful. I know she's Jonas's mother, but other than that, like, I got nothing for her. like her character can suffer a horrible fate at this point. Like, maybe, and less smart shows have done it successfully. It's possible for them to add some substance to some of these impulses or some of this reasoning, but as it stands at the moment, I'm like, she's terrible. She's got to go. Like, she's awful. She's awful.
You may recall what happened when this happened.
Well, when she first falsely accused him.
I told you. I was like, you can't be on Team Hannah anymore. Like, it's just it's too much.
She's awful. Because at least we mentioned last episode about Ulrich doing what he does to Helga. As much goodwill as bottoms out from me for him in that moment, you took me a pretty far piece of defending the show successfully in, like, substantiating that decision. These decisions Hannah is making are like, good Lord, you're just awful, aren't you? You're just awful and selfish and just do not care whose lives you destroy along the way for your own ends and gains. And it's just, she's awful. Awful person.
Yes. Yeah. again, who knows what season 2 holds. I would assume time jumping commences. I would assume, and actually I would hope that we aren't done with the 2019 characters.
Oh my gosh! Can you imagine if if season 2 just all takes place in the future, like no time travel? I mean, that can't be the case. But I'm just like, oh my gosh! Like,
what's really great
really
is the potential.
Away from
what's really great is the potential of listeners that have already watched season 2. They're like, you guys are dummies. You have no idea. It does all take place in 52. It's literally just Jonas wandering the desiccated apocalyptic wasteland looking for food.
The creator saw the film Qui-Gon and was like, I want that. So I'm gonna I'm just gonna do that. Oh man, that's funny.
A couple of random notes I love. So there's the scene in 53 of priest Noah consoling Helga's mother.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love the malevolent score playing over that scene. Like, the show writ large is pretty subtle. But I love that moment of like, nah, man, he's a bad guy. He's a bad guy. If you didn't know,
this is awful.
Watcher, he's a bad guy.
Yes, exactly. Well, and I believe it's in Everything Is Now, like his convincing of Helga like when his ultimate plan, like when he's expressing it in the bunker, like it is so fatalistic and anarchistic, and it is just and. What does he say? Like, life is a spiral of pain, and he believes he's building this sort of temporal version of an arc, which is why he calls himself Noah.
Yeah.
So, but it's just, I mean, he's a bad character.
What I wrote down of it is, there is no God, there is no plan, there's nothing but pain and chaos. The world is doomed to be destroyed. He indicates the chair and says, "This is our task. This is our arc, and I'm Noah."
This is our arc. Yeah. Oh man.
One of my favorite sort of just like brain busting moments is in 1953. There's a smash cut, kind of a juxtaposed edit, similar to last week when I mentioned the rain in Spain that stays mainly on the plane. No, but the rain in 19 at the same time as 86. Well, there's a parallel cut between the years 86 and 53, but those parallel cuts are 1953 Egon chasing 2019 Ulrich through the woods, while at the same time 1986 Egon is incarcerating teenage Ulrich for a crime he didn't commit. Like, I love that. Yeah. It's so fantastic.
Yep. Oh, it's awesome. Yeah, it's really awesome. And that is something that I find very impressive about the show as a whole, is the way in which it's able to make connections that amazingly don't feel forced.
Right.
Like, it's clearly a bit, if I'm being very blunt, the cinematic and narrative storytelling is manipulative. It's leading you to certain places, but I love how unforced it all feels. It all feels very natural. This is just the natural stream and flow of things that have led us to history circling in on itself, and these certain repetitions, or history repeating itself, sometimes literally, that I think is really, really fascinating.
But I mean, think
sometimes
about it.
Opposite results, sometimes with similar results. Yeah.
You commented on old lady Claudia going to 53 Townhouse. Like, think about when you started the show and watching that first episode, and your brain's trying to kind of tune in. The fact that within 8 episodes, this series would take, and I think it's in maybe 5 and 6, where Elder Jonas takes the device to Old Man Tenhouse.
Yes, that's in that's in 86. I think it's in 86.
Right, but I'm saying episode wise, I think it's like 5 or 6. But
gotcha.
But think about this: when you start that show, you meet Ulrich, the Nielsen family. The fact that in 8 episodes, that character's arc is going to take him to 1953, where his cell phone is his smartphone from 2019 is going to be the instigating technological agent to create a time machine that bounces these characters throughout the generation. I mean, it's bonkers. It's so crazy.
It's pretty crazy.
It's pretty cool.
It's pretty crazy. Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. That was all I had on Everything Is Now.
Well, we got to shout out old Patchy, right? I mean,
yeah,
he finally gets some play. He finally gets a purpose.
Patchy's back.
Patchy gets a purpose. That's the name of this episode 9. He finally has a role, however sort of nefarious it is. That sucks.
Yeah, it does.
But yeah, I think that's about it. We talked about Bad Hannah. We talked about Ulrich. Thinking he's killed. All right, fine. We can go to 10.
So here we are in Alpha and Omega, and you patted me on the back for it earlier. I'm going to preen for a moment. I took a gamble.
Preen. Get up. Walk around.
I was. Oh, I am. Listeners can't see it, but I am pacing my room right now, wearing a very large gold-encrusted bathrobe. No, I'm just kidding. So,
woo!
but woo! I'm not gonna do it. I want to, but I'm not gonna do it.
I think you just sort of did it.
Wow. You know what, brother? Okay, I was the moment on the pod, like when with I believe it was with A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. The moment on that pod where I was like, I'm calling it right now. Jonas is the trench coat man. I was sitting there like, man, I'm gonna feel so dumb. I'm sitting there, I was so confident about it, and it really was impulsed by I don't know if you remember this element to it, but I had previously guessed that the body they found with all the 80s gear on it, I was like,
smart.
That's
You're
mass.
a good man.
Well, see, it's actually somewhat rare. I am a good man. No, I'm just kidding. That felt weird to say. So, but it's actually somewhat rare for me to be that intuitive about narratives that are this dense. I mean, there have been tons of things like in films that people have said like, oh, I spotted this twist from a mile away, and I'm sitting there like, wow, I did not see that coming at all. Like a recent one, spoiler alert ahead for if you've not seen M. Night Shyamalan's The Visit, an alarming number of people said that they intuited the twist I won't even say it, the twist in that film, but that twist was a big surprise to me. I never saw that coming. So the fact that I've not only guessed Mads, but that I guessed correctly about Jonas, I'm just like, wow, this is something of a rarity for me to be on, this adept at putting those puzzle pieces together. But when they were doing, the reason I'm bringing that up right now is because when they were talking about like Helga being being seen in multiple places, because if listeners haven't picked up on it, or if viewers didn't catch it, Helga is the one who is responsible for abducting these children. Like, he's doing it at Noah's behest, but Helga, the old man, the power plant worker, the young boy who was nearly beat to death by Ulrich, he is the one who is abducting these children. What he believes is that he is doing it for this higher, broader, intentional purpose, because he's been deceived by Noah for whatever means and ends Noah has intended. So when they were talking about how they had seen Helga in all these different places, I was like, are they trying to say Helga's the trench coat man? Man, I feel so dumb. I thought it was Jonas. And then when the older Jonas is talking to younger Jonas, I'm sitting there. I had nobody to tell. I was
tell the room,
standing.
Tell the room.
I was just standing there, like standing up from my couch watching. I was like, I knew it. I knew it.
Brother, I got your number. I knew you. I knew you from the very beginning. You were doing it. I knew who you were. You came in there trying to hide, but I got you. I got you right there. Let me tell you.
God, you idiot.
So
what's amazing about that moment that just happened is, we record these in pairs, and I've had some Fireball whiskey, and I'm like, is he still going? Is this just me? But you were still going. That was beautiful and brilliant. I'm glad to know you.
It's awesome. I love you too.
Well,
so,
I'm
I was
glad
proud of myself.
you had the sort of foresight to call Jonas. Although, I mean, I guess it matters that he's declaring it in that scene. But I mean, that's a great scene.
Oh my gosh, yeah, because younger Jonas, 2019 version Jonas is trapped in this bunker we keep referencing that Noah has that Alexander has built, and that Noah is purposing, by manipulating Helga into kidnapping people. And that was one thing, like we talk about the threads that it doesn't answer. Like I have no idea what that chair does except for apparently scorch the eye rim of its victims, and like I don't know what its intention or purpose is. The first boy that gets abducted or that's missing that we know about is Eric, and like he doesn't show up again at all. Like I don't know what happened to him. So, but I know
he got like deposited in 1920, and he's just like roaming the streets, just like trying to figure out what's up.
He's like, what happened? I don't understand. He's walking around like.
Season 3 of Dark is literally just the adventures of Eric, in 1920 Winden, but there's no city there yet, so it's just woods.
That's funny. So yeah, but getting back to that scene, that wonderful scene where Jonas reveals it, is like, so 2019, Jonas is stuck in that bunker while the version he now realizes is his older self is, and it's, the things that will trip your mind out, like older version of him gave the letter to him that he later burned, but then he receives it for the first time from Innes, and it's just, oh my gosh, it's, stuff like that. I do love.
Well,
I don't think I've. Go ahead. You. No.
There's, to your point about what does the chair do, and I don't have an answer, and it's Matt, the interview I referenced earlier from the Wrap, makes note that there are things that just aren't answerable at the moment, if at all, ever. But there's something significant about 86 specifically. Like the way they intentionally designed the bunker in that year. And I do think whatever significance is there is tied to the fact that it is old Jonas that sets off the device under it. Like I do think those are correlative elements. I don't have the brain to understand what it is.
And maybe they haven't given us the puzzle pieces to really be able to intuit it. Like maybe we'd have to know more than they've shown us to really put it all together. One of the things, and this is what I was going to say a second ago, one of the things I love about time travel stories is I do love the way that clever and well-crafted ones like Dark can play on this whole whatever happened idea. The notion of moving puzzle pieces or little things that find their way to a person in the past, which is how they wound up in this space in the future that then prompted this other event and everything. I love following
to your
that.
point.
It's fun.
One of my favorite, it's not a favorite character moment, but it's a favorite just kind of mythology moment, is when 2019 Charlotte, the police chief, is studying the microfiche and stumbles on Ulrich's mugshot from 1953. That's amazing. I love that moment.
I wrote that moment down in all caps.
That's so awesome.
It is one of it's phenomenal because she, and what's brilliant about it, her character finding it is brilliant, because who would have located that before? And even if somebody saw that image in the microfiche before, if they happened to know Ulrich, would have thought the same thing that any of us right now would think, seeing a picture of somebody that resembled a friend of ours on Google search or something. We would think, oh, that looks a lot like so-and-so.
Right.
And then we'd move on with our lives, But, like, the fact that Charlotte is finding it because of some of these hunches she's beginning to put together, that's an amazing moment. It's wonderful. It's fantastic.
Well, and also further kind of what I referenced a couple weeks ago at this point, but about the surprise I experienced at the notion of Mikkel staying in 86. Same idea here. It's the implications of her discovering that photo are pretty dire for 2019 Ulrich.
It would not surprise me if if his fate basically. Now, I don't know because I haven't seen the show, but it would not surprise me if his fate ultimately sort of ended in that timeline, in that thread, and if that's where he dies, or if that's just where he ends his story. Yeah, it would not surprise me at all.
This is a super random technical note, but Jonas's last name is Conwald.
Oh, okay.
One of the cops with Egon Tiedemann in 1953's last name is Conwald. It's a total throwaway moment, but they reference one of the other cops as Conwald. And it's funny because when it happened, I was like, that name is pinging for me. And it's when Elder Jonas tells young Jonas his name. I was like, that's it. Let's see here.
Can I mention just
please.
a passing sort of? It's a shot. I love the opening shot of the final episode where the rift actually opens up and Peter sees it.
That scene is great. Yes.
Yes. Just the moment, because it's it starts as this kind of explosive thread in the air that then expands out to drop the body of Mads like down into that bunker area. But the special effect on it is, in a show that is really has barely any special effects at all until the final episode, that was a great, very effective effect.
Well, and to me, the power of that scene is what I would tout as one of the major strengths of season 1, which is, again, characters operating in their normal broken lives, encountering phenomena beyond their comprehension. Like that scene, it's intentionally prefaced by the on-screen note, the day of Mikkel's disappearance, or 8 hours, like 8 hours after Mikkel's disappearance or something. Yeah, but day of, that's it. And poor Peter has just gone and been tempted by his former, side hobby and resisted it, but gone to the bunker to kind of self-flagellate and quotes the Serenity Prayer. It's this really kind of heartbreaking moment, and then the camera shot is of his face, and the room lights up, and you see his eyes widen. That's a great scene.
Gosh, yeah, it's a really wonderful scene. There's a lot of great individual moments in this finale. It's
one of my favorite is 86 old man Helga confronting. I'm sorry, 2019 old man Helga confronting 86 Helga. That's a great moment.
Oh, and it's one because like he hugs him, and he's trying to convince him to stop.
You have to stop. Noah isn't saving the world from evil. He is evil.
And then, of course, culminating in him actively crashing into the younger version of himself, and then that's where he as a being dies there in 1986, dies there in that car crash. And so, these are some of the things that Dark just sort of makes my head hurt, but in a very exciting way.
Right.
Like, of things like, we know by implication that because Mikkel stayed in 1986 and grew up and became Michael and became Jonas's father, that the 2019 people will never find Mikkel. We know that. Because they will never that search will never end. So now 2019 people are sort of searching for Helga, who has frequently gone wandering, and they've found him before in the woods and everything, but they will never find him because he went back to 1986 and died in a car crash trying to stop himself. And so like when you start thinking about those kind of things, again, it makes your head hurt, but in a way that's narratively very exciting and very compelling. But those are the kinds of things that I was sort of tracking of like, okay, well, if this person suffered this fate in this time frame, then their, if you want to call them their home base time, like where they belong, if you will, they will forever be a mystery. Yeah. And it's just, that's fascinating.
Well, and I have threads of theme, but nothing written down that's robust, and I'm sure we'll pull some stuff out, but I did want my kind of last major notes of episode 10 are more kind of ponderances for the future, like kind of trying to so I don't know if you have any real specifics you want to revisit of 10.
Nothing specific. No, the only other note that I have would be something to spark a thematic conversation.
Well, then two kind of major takeaways. One, if we were doing scares, which I'm not inviting us to do, but I really was, even this time around, jumped when 19 Jonas is in the hospital room of 86 Mikkel, and Noah is sitting there and puts his finger over his lips to hush, and
oh my gosh,
Helga jumps him from behind. That made me jump. But one is, this is very Lostian. Noah to Bartosz in 2019 says there are two groups fighting to control time travel, light and shadow. It made me think of John Locke. There's two sides of every whatever, light and dark.
There's a lot of echoes.
There is a lot of lost echoes in this.
Yeah.
But noticeably, Noah casts Claudia as the antagonist here.
Yep.
So one, that's sort of a thread we can follow if we want in terms of like what's to come. So I'm kind of opening the door of, do you have any speculations about what's to come? But the other thing to tandem with that is I worry now, unless some big redemption sort of thing happens, and redemption is kind of the wrong word, but unless some course correction happens, to borrow Desmond David Hume's language, I don't know that Jonas is the hero we want him to be, because as powerful as, I don't mean he's got malevolent intent. That's not what I mean.
Right.
But on the one hand, I love when teenage Jonas, he bids farewell to his mother. She doesn't know that, but that's what he's doing. And then he goes to 86 and he's so resolved when he talks to 86 Charlotte with the birds in the forest.
Yep.
And he says, what day is it? What year? She asked him, why are you here? And do you remember what he says?
No, I don't.
Well, he says to bring someone back from the dead. Now, he is going back ostensibly to kind of reclaim Mikkel. We know that doesn't happen because he gets sidelined by Helga and gets then ported ultimately to 52.
Right.
Where I'm going with this, though, is the resolve. I'm worried, again, I have no idea what's next. I'm worried that Jonas's perceived personal mission is a wrong one, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Because remember, Noah kind of seems to invite the fact that Jonas sets off the device in 86. Like that seems to be this inciting incident for it's the incident from season 5 from Jughead.
Right. Oh my gosh. There's so much of it. This notion, I thought a lot about for those who haven't seen Lost or haven't watched it, then this is not going to mean anything to them. But I thought a lot about the Jughead plotline and this whole notion of Jonas's mission to explode or destroy the rift, and according to Noah, that is what ultimately the paradox is, that in his efforts to destroy it, he actually created it.
Right.
And so a couple of things. First thing that I think we can intuit is that mostly because of that ominous musical score you referenced earlier, kind of signaling, Noah's a bad guy. Not to mention the fact that they do kind of frame him as a somewhat malevolent individual in virtually every what good guy invites
has
teen
that
boy,
kind of back tat.
Yeah, well, that back tattoo, but then also invites teen Bartosz into his limo in an alley at night. Like that's not the setting of a benevolent individual.
Let's give him the benefit of the doubt.
So I think you can intuit that the show is leading you to believe like he's not an upright individual, and so if there really is this theme of light and shadow at play, very much like the Jacob Man in Black thing from Lost, then you can intuit that Noah is kind of positing himself as the figure of light, but because we have seen so many other things, plus he's one thing that can definitively be said is he clearly finds children disposable, for whatever end or purpose. So you can then intuit that perhaps Claudia, who admittedly the show has not given us a ton of information about,
right?
But Claudia and her efforts could then be intuited to at least be efforts of benevolence, if not actively her being the good guy. That she's at least trying to combat. No, that's okay. She's at least trying to combat those other things. Go ahead.
All I was going to say is it is interesting, and this is just coming to me as you're saying that, to note that however mysterious old lady Claudia's motivations are, we see her formation as a child in 53, as the administrator or I guess I don't mean administrator in the negative light, but as in like the head of the nuclear plant in
Oh,
86,
sure.
86 being when she discovers Gretchen as this propulsive moment, as opposed to Noah, whose origins were still pretty shady. We don't know.
Right.
So it is interesting. I guess all I'm saying is from a purely which one of these is the bad guy? We at least have
right.
We don't have all the information on Claudia, but we have a good bit to sort of divine certain overarching intentions from.
Right. And so I think the other thing that I find just immensely fascinating is obviously the paradox of time travel movies. Have you ever? Okay, so this is a very random insertion, and I'm not going to say much about it if the answer is no. Have you seen the film starring Ethan Hawke called Predestination?
Nope.
Have you seen that film? Okay, all right. Then I'm not going to say too much about it, except that.
But I do like Ethan Hawke.
Oh, there you go. Except for what could be intuited from a trailer or a brief paragraph description, under the film title, it does involve travels through time of a piece and involves similar paradoxes of, wait a second, well, if time travel was not possible, then this would never have existed. So what's the prime mover of this sequence of events?
Right.
Because, the sequence of events kind of depend on somebody going back in time to initiating a thing. And there are so many of those in this. Jonas creating supposedly the time rift or the black hole that he's trying to destroy. The Tannhaus seeing the device in the past from the future, therefore creating the device that would then
crazy.
be shown to him. So
Right.
many of those different things that are fascinating to think about from the context of just as a science fiction fan.
Sure.
It's wonderful to think
Well,
about.
and also compound onto that, Elder Jonas bringing a defunct version of the machine that Tannhaus in 86 has perfected. I was like, okay.
Yeah, it's pretty trippy. And I think that as a potential thematic note, so I'm not trying actively to pivot from the, philosophical or ideological into the very personal. In fact, I don't know how personal I'm about to be, but something that I think about as an individual very, very often are these notions. And again, we've been doing this thing for 3 years now, so I don't know if I may have already said all of the things that hit my mind frequently at some point on some episode or not. But I think about often the idea of when someone makes a statement, they say, well, I had to go through what I went through, or I had to do what I did because that brought me here, or that made me who I am. Do you understand what I mean when I say that
Sure.
general notion?
Yeah.
So somebody will look back on a thing, sometimes a regrettable decision, sometimes a traumatic occurrence, or something happened, and be like, well, I had to go through that to go to this. And I explore that notion in my imagination frequently because I have complicated feelings about that. When I say I have complicated feelings about it, I have a multitude of differing and sometimes opposing feelings about it. One of my feelings about it is the notion of like, well, I don't know that you have to, if you're talking about a choice that you made, I don't know that you have to make a bad choice to mature. I don't know that you have to make a wrong choice. You just did, and thankfully were able to mature from it. I think, in terms of trauma that happens, I have some real challenges to the notion of like, well, that trauma, and you hear this a lot in certain religious circles where they talk about like, well, that horrible, painful thing had to happen because then that produced this other good thing that came down the line. And I have some real complicated feelings about that ideology and even that theology, So when I think about these kind of things, and I think about the intentions of the characters in Dark, and they're going and so many characters, there may have only been like 3 or 4 that said it several times, but I heard several times through the show, like, this had to happen. It happened for a reason. There's intention and purpose behind this. And at the same time, mostly from the character of Tannhaus, you're getting these broad philosophical extrapolations too about like, did we come from God? Did we evolve from something? Like there's a lot of religious language in the show that surprised me. It doesn't go anywhere in terms of treatise or a hypothesis, but there's a lot of just passing explorations of religious and spiritual thought processes. And so what this got me thinking about is this notion of, I look back at things with my life in my life with regret, choices I made, choices I didn't make. I said last episode that this was gonna come up a lot. Like the hinge for me in my thoughts around the show, there are so many great moments, there are so many wonderful lines. When I think about this show in the context of only having seen season 1, my thoughts revolve around Jonas / Trenchcoat Man saying every decision for something is a decision against something else.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's a very convicting sentence.
It is, and it's something that really despite my feelings about its ending, like, if nothing else, which there's a lot more else, but if nothing else, I walk away with that going, just dang, that is a challenging, that's a statement worth sitting with and meditating on and pondering. The power of choice that we so frequently dismiss, even if we would give it a cursory platitude with our language. Like, the power of a choice for something is a choice against something else. A choice for how you spend your time, for who you choose to spend your time with, for what you choose to do with that time, and in getting very close to Gandalf's words. But like, all of these choices that we would make for something, we may have our fingers on the pulse of the choice the choice against something. But I feel like most of the time we're just not that cognizant of it. And so then we get further down the line of our lives or our journeys, and we look back and ponder certain choices, and I don't know, it's like, it's easy to think about, well, I say it's easy, most of us have a tendency to think about that in terms of what I mentioned when I started this rant of, well, I had to do that, or that led me here, or whatever. And then there are things I look back on in my life and I'm like, I would change that. Like, I don't want to end up any different than I am. Like, like, I don't want to end up in a dramatically different station of my life. But there are things that I look back on and I'm like, are you kidding? Of course I would change that.
Well, but I think it's important to note, and this is a response in the immediate, but I do want to piggyback on some of what you're saying. Your comment right now makes me think of, you referenced her last week, but Brene Brown's sort of notes about owning all the things that have happened to you. And so I think it's important to note, I would agree with you that it is probably a toxic sort of ideology or perspective to say, well, that trauma had to occur in order for X. I think there's a big difference, though, between that trauma had to occur and that trauma occurred, and I have chosen to own it this way and have it produce this result in my life. And that's a very different sort of perspective. But,
it is. Yeah,
to your point, it's not so much about erasing regret. It's about saying, these things all happened to me, and there are some awesome ones, there's some really awful ones. And wholeness of self, and moving forward in that wholeness requires, as much as we don't want it to, kind of owning all of that.
Yeah, I agree.
It's interesting. Do you have, like, I'm taking where you're at and kind of running with it. Do you have immediate others that you want to address?
No, I want to. I'd like to just sort of camp on that for a minute, or if you have some other things you'd like to introduce, I sort of said my piece about that.
Yeah, there's two kind of major ideas. One that kind of couples well with what you're describing, and that's the rewatching the series made me think a little bit of the film Hereditary, not so much because they're similar tonally, but because as my personal faith has widened, as my personal theology has broadened, I need the reminding sometimes of a thing that I think is integral to a right spirit, if you will, a right faith, and that's, we don't exist in a vacuum. Yeah. And like in Hereditary, I think what's fascinating about the first season of Dark is what starts, or what feels like it starts, as this very isolated tale of a family or two becomes this, and not becomes, but always was, right? Like,
Right.
the show doesn't suddenly morph into intergenerational chronological jumping. Those things were always present. We just weren't privy to them, and I think it's important to be cognizant of this notion that how this could teeter into political, and I don't really want it to or mean it to, but we want so badly sometimes, especially in the country we live in, and which is an ironic way to walk up to this considering the series we're in, of the notion of independence and individualism, individual effort and choice yielding personal gain and success. That is very toxic ultimately. I mean, it really is. And versus what is a much more, now Dark presents it in a sci-fi genre perspective, but we as people of a Jesus mentality should adopt is, it's not individualism. It is interdependence. It is not thinking, well, I am me, I am Nathan, I'm right here in 2019, I'm a dad of 3, and I'm going to make my mark, and I'm going to make my way, and I'm going to earn my success, and it's going to be by the fruit of my own labors. And none of y'all are a part of that. Like, the story of Dark is be careful how independent you think you are, because you are it's kind of like saying, well, all of these things force me to be a certain way, versus all of these things meaning generations behind you. Let's get a bit wild in our talk here. The generations ahead of you. All of these personae contribute to the formation of who you are. It's the cloud of witnesses, right? I mean, we are not, of course. We are not independent agents, and for good and bad. Like we can be the result of, sinister is the wrong word, but we can be unwittingly acting out of forces that are not for our good.
Right.
At the same time that we are the vanguard of forces that will good into the world. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but
no, it does.
I don't know. I just think the season of this show particularly really speaks in that regard, which is why maybe I keep being fascinated about this notion of just individual normal humans caught up in a wide, grand, cosmic story. Now, the show's called Dark, and it does have, kind of aspects of sort of, malevolence is the wrong word, but, just kind of not totally healthy sort of expressions to it. But interestingly, what I wrote down in the final moments of the season was when Elder Jonas is tripping the device in 86. I think it's this amazing moment where you see every generation we've encountered experiencing it, right? Do you remember this?
Yes.
And what I wrote is the crucifixion, which is, I don't know how much Campolo you've read. It's been years since I've read
Speaking My Mind.
Campolo. Yeah, it's been years since I've read him specifically, but I do remember echoes of some of his teaching, and I remember a phrase of his of the eternal present, and that the crucifixion itself was this catalyzing agent of cosmic proportion. And again, the show Dark is not necessarily interested in these particular versions of things, but that moment where this one character has this one action that reverberates across the time and space spectrum, is really powerful.
Well, and I want to, with my apologies for interrupting you, I want to, that what you're referencing from Campolo, I couldn't quote it, but I remember being so riveted by it, almost a science fiction-y thought
Yeah.
that he had in that book where he was talking about when you realize the implications of like quantum theory and like the idea of time in the context of quantum mechanics and everything, that basically skipping to the punchline without getting hyper nerdy about it, because I wouldn't even be able to recall all the specifics about it. He basically said like Christ is on the cross right now.
Yeah.
He's present on the, and so when you talk about this, the reverberation, it's like you can think in linear terms where you're like, well, 2,000 years ago, Christ did this cosmic thing. We believers believe that changed the world forever. But then when you think about that notion of the eternal present, it's a very different implication to, and this is the kind of stuff that I love thinking about when we get into, this is where science fiction meets theology, and that is if there was ever an intersection made for my dancing around in, it's that one, or the intersection of horror and faith. But this notion of like, yes, that this very moment while you and I are having this conversation, and this very moment where after it broadcasts, listeners are listening to this conversation.
Sure.
In this moment, Christ is present on the cross. Christ, in this moment, the tomb is empty. In this moment, like all of these different sort of implications that reverberate throughout cosmology to the believer of, and it is, you're talking about this moment in dark where everybody is experiencing it in their particular unique way, and everybody is seeing this thing happen, but and it looks similar to everybody, but it's not the same for everybody,
Right.
and it is, there's a power to that notion that I find deeply compelling, and that I feel like it's worth us recognizing, because we feel so, when we think of time, and we brought this up when we did our TV Guidepost episode about The Haunting of Hill House, and we brought up Nell's confetti speech, that it's like, when we think of time as behind us and it's gone, and
did you just? I'm going to be real rude right now. Did you just say everyone sees it differently but experiences the same way? What did you say?
Like everybody sees it slightly differently. Like that moment in dark when everybody's experiencing the drift simultaneously.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm totally hijacking where you're going. I'm apologizing, but I'm building on where you're at, which is, say it again. Everybody sees it differently.
Everybody experiences it slightly differently, but it's also kind of the same. Like it's different but same.
I've got too much Fireball in me, and we talked about Quiet On in the same night for me to wrestle this down in a coherent fashion. But here we go. Everyone experiences it differently, but Read, it is the same phenomena.
Right.
And follow this sort of, I keep harping on him, this universal Christ idea. If Christ is reflected in all things, it is the same phenomena that we just experience differently. And which is a really, it is as equally powerful of an idea as it is liberating of an idea.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
it does not, what do you see? Well, I see this thing. It doesn't quite sound like what, quote unquote, evangelical America or whatever. I don't mean that derisively per se, other than just a particular rigid box. Like, well, is it life-giving? Yes, that is probably Christ. Right? Like, that's amazing to ponder and consider. And, you just noted the metaphysics of theology. Like, that's a really powerful thing and liberating thing to recognize. You and I, Read and Nathan typically do, but you and I, human, and me, who is also human, don't always have the same name.
Yeah.
But are naming the same phenomena. And that's, I don't know how to wrestle that down, but that is a really powerful thing to me in this moment.
No, I hear you. It's not quite the same thing, but what it reminds me of is something that I go to a lot in my conversations with people. I have conversations with people from time to time about the frustrating notion in evangelical America about well, what is God's will for your life, or what's God's plan for your life, or how do I know what God's purpose for me is, or all that. I don't have time to get into all of why that conversation comes up so frequently and so frequently frustrates me when I hear people wrestling over it. But it reminds me, and when we talk about like the same phenomena with different names, it reminds me of the moment at the end of the Gospel of John where Jesus is speaking with Peter. This is after Christ has resurrected, and Jesus is speaking with Peter, and he does what many consider to be the restoration of Peter's denial of Christ three times, where he says to him, "Do you love me? Feed my sheep. Do you love me? Feed my lambs. Do you love me? Feed my sheep." And so, Jesus repeats that to him, and then Jesus says to him, now I don't have the scripture pulled up, but Jesus speaks to him and he says, someone's going to dress you in clothes you don't want to wear and take you somewhere you don't want to go. And basically Jesus lays out for him, there is a fate ahead of you, and this is where you are headed. This is the path that you're on. And so then, and it's kind of you can view it as a kind of a comical moment, because Jesus and Peter are having a conversation, but John is eavesdropping on it, like he's nearby and he's eavesdropping on it. In a way, it's kind of funny to me when I think about it, in a way that Peter notices and calls out, and clearly he's eavesdropping on it because he wrote the book. How would he know what Jesus and Peter said in a private conversation if he wasn't eavesdropping? But he's eavesdropping, and Peter calls him out on it, catches him, and Jesus has just told him, you're on this path, you're going to suffer this fate. Peter turns around and points to John and says, well, what about him? And Jesus looks at him and says, if I choose to allow him to remain until I return, what is that to you? And there's so much wrapped up in my theological understanding, in my personal philosophy, in the navigation of my world among my family, my friends, my life, of like understanding, like I can't try to make it look like what this other person has. Just because I may be in a similar way or something, like it is the same phenomena but specific. It is universal, but the idea of Christ, we obviously are believers, so the significance of Christ on the cross, the significance of the empty tomb, all of those things are the same for everyone, I believe, but are going to be experienced with the specificity of the spectrum of human experience. And we talk in this series about how, this idea that we've gathered that prompted the series, and it's fitting it's coming back for the themes of dark, is that of Christ on every road. There are some people who would hear that and would frustrate me to pieces because they'd start to, well, are you talking universalism? Are you talking pluralism? Are you talking all these ideologies? And I want so badly to say, can you just pause for a moment and acknowledge and recognize the mystery that we have been invited into? We have been invited into a profound mystery that can be described if we want to try, and can be expressed if we want to open ourselves up to that. But the arrogance to think we could ever define it, and the arrogance to think that we could ever encapsulate it or capture it, because it is a mystery that is so far extends beyond us. And part of the impulse behind this series, I'm sorry that I'm hijacking so much.
Dude, you're fine.
Part of the impulse behind this series is there are, and we do a podcast where we talk about horror and faith, and we're two friends just getting the chance to sort of unpack these views of the world that we have in these contexts. But part of why we wanted to do this series is that there's a world beyond ours. There's an experience beyond ours. We are still going to be approaching them with our own experience and definitions, but looking into a window of things that we know we're not going to be able to fully understand, and that we know we're not going to be able to fully grasp and wrestle down. And personally speaking, you said earlier what a liberating thought it is. Like, I am very, very comfortable with mystery, with the idea of there being
Let the mystery
things
be, brother.
Let the mystery be. Oh, I do love leftovers. But, like, I'm comfortable with that idea of, to say that I'm comfortable is probably too arrogant, but I do feel like I'm framed as a person who embraces it.
Come on, and it's not arrogant. Like, Rohr has the definition of mystery as unending knowability, which is fantastic. But a couple of thoughts there. One, I would say it's not that I have to go through this to become who I am. It's not Is it universalism? It's universal hope. Yes, I hope universally. I hope universally for the redemption of all things, man and matter. And I do think there's grounds for that hope. But I do think it's amazing to. There was something just a second ago that pinged wildly for me. It's, the Jesus is on every road. Like this cultural notion, like Qui-Gon last week. It was difficult for me to access it the way it was intended. Is Christ on that road? Yes. A girl walks home alone at night. I was able to access it on a certain level. Is there stuff still foreign to me that's embedded in there? Absolutely. Is Christ on that road? Yes, he is. It is different. It is different experiences of the same phenomena. And we are arrogant. You mentioned being concerned you're feeling arrogant. I think it's arrogant to dismiss the notion that there are unique and only routes that look a very specific way. It literally is the foundation. Go listen to the Wailing. It is we have propped up a conflict-based entry into the kingdom, which is look the way I do for admittance, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to holy cow, this cosmic, intergenerational, interdimensional. It's Doug TeNapel, alien saying, "You have one too." It is Jesus on every possible path, shepherding us all into a great kingdom. And please.
You just said it, shepherding us all into a great kingdom. I looked it up seconds ago. I was listening to you, but I couldn't ignore it.
Yeah, whatever you did.
I'm going to quote John. I know. I'm going to quote John chapter 10 and a few verses here. John chapter 10, beginning at verse 14, these are the words of Christ. John chapter 10, verse 14, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Verse 15 says, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. Now check out verse 16. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. And it's I could not escape. I had to look it up because I could not escape.
Good.
Like this is it. This is the same phenomena, but there are other sheep. There are other sheep, and Christ said to his people, I must bring them also. Now, people can define that. I mean, like, I'm sure there are listeners out there who, from your experience and understanding, may feel like you have a very firm definition of what that means. Here's what I'm going to invite for you and I to do right now, Nathan, and for me to carry with me however long I have the strength to carry it. To never resolve, I'm getting a little emotional, to never resolve that the other sheep in another pen is concluded.
Yeah.
And that to find a place where I will never sit there and say, well, sheep pen is pretty full. Sheep pen's pretty done. But to hear the words of who I deem Master and Lord say, I have other sheep, and I must bring them also, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. Good God, sitting here in this moment, every inch of my being is arrested and convicted and emboldened and enlivened to say, I cannot sit here and say, oh, well, I have defined these sheep. These sheep are confined and defined because that's what he gave to his people, this notion of I'm laying down my life for these sheep. He spoke of the good shepherd of going out and finding the one while the 99 waited.
I was about to say, let's marry some sheep analogies here, and however full you think the pen is, whoever is outside the pen is sought after, found, and returned.
Yes, and sought after with complete focal abandon.
Sure.
To where that is the priority, is that one. And I had made a statement that I am positive I've quoted this on the on the show before that I still believe that one day the shepherd will return carrying in his arms every single one that the 99 have been convincing themselves he doesn't care about. And I feel like that's something that we must recognize as we are examining and discerning the world around us and the people in it who look different than us and talk different than us and think different than us. And if we think for a minute that they are any less fearfully or wonderfully are made, then that is the antithesis of the gospel. That is the antithesis of the truth. If we think for a moment that Christ cares any less for them, that he bled any less for them, that he seeks with any less fervency to redeem and rescue them, we have fooled ourselves. We are not listening to the Good Shepherd who has told us very plainly, I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also.
And lest we get too far from the analogy, different experiences, same phenomena. Like that's powerful. Wow. Now my concern is that subsequent seasons of Dark are going to break that analogy, but for season 1 at least, it works, brother. It works.
Yeah,
and if to borrow Reed's language from earlier, if you're worried, hey, I have to have this narrow theology in order to find a broader one, you don't. You just have a narrow theology. Now broaden it.
Oh man,
there's no have to.
Man, I am so full. I don't want to this happens sometimes on the show. It has happened before. But I say with all sincerity, maybe the listeners can hear it. Maybe they tuned out because I was doing silly old man voice. But my heart is so full right now with the expectancy of what I deem to be the truth that we are sought after, and that not we alone. That even if we were found, that all who are lost are sought after. And I'm just, man, my heart is so thick and full of that. And I never, when I ended it and was like, well, that's kind of a bummer end, I never thought that it would produce, a conversation of this caliber. But I'm very, very grateful for it. I'm thankful that it did. So
that's good stuff, man. That's good stuff. Yeah. I am happy to. I know with non-film stuff, we sometimes will abandon the fog meter, but I feel like it's appropriate.
No, let's do it.
Okay, cool.
Let's do it.
So I introduced last week. You introduced this week.
So we for on as many episodes as we deem fit, we rate this material by the fog meter, which is the fear and the God measurement. It's scare factor and its substance. So on the fear level for Dark, there's a tremendous amount of existential anxiety. There's some great suspense moments, but it's not of the caliber that I would necessarily call nightmarish or even vastly disturbing. I'm going to give it a 4 on the general fear measurement.
I'm going to go to 5. The first time through, I was indeed harrowed by Mikkel's disappearance. But even then, I think like you said, the existential aspects of it, what feel like true character consequences for some of the choices that are made. I'm thinking of Ulrich's journey and that sort of thing, really do resonate from a quote unquote fear aspect, and so I'm gonna stick with a 5 on that.
Okay, what would you give it for the God measurement?
Well, even I didn't know how perfectly it would culminate the notion of Jesus on every road, Jesus in every dimension, Jesus in every generation, Jesus in the friggin' all the whatevers. Only because we applied a pretty thick layer of our own over it, I won't go 10, but I'm going to go 9 because that's pretty. It's yeah. If I were going purely based on
narrative complexity in terms of substance, it would be an easy 10 for me. Thematically, I'm still kind of trying to grasp it, and I, like you, agree that so much of what we were able to extrapolate is kind of what we've been building towards and in our own knitting of our hearts and minds together in these conversations. So I'm gonna hedge a little bit, and I'm going to go 7.
Cool. Well, that means that Dark Season 1 nets a 6.5 rating on the fog meter, which is good, man. 10 hours worth of anything holding up to 6.5 points is pretty formidable.
Absolutely.
Let's hope that your sort of take on the at least RT consensus is strong or is appropriate, and we are going to enjoy season 2 because we're going to do season 2 regardless.
We are going to do it. We are going to do it.
Reed, thank you for. I know you deferred a little bit in the wailing to some of my sort of broader intentions for what this broad, kind of lengthy conversation could be, overarching, and I appreciate your trust and willingness to step onto the road as well. This is fun. I'm looking forward to the 70s. I'm looking forward to getting back to phase 2 of speaking in tongues.
Me too.
Yeah.
Oh, me too. So, all right. So, ladies and gentlemen, we at this point in time, the voting. Well, let me just be transparent with you. In true dark time travel fashion, at the point of this recording, we have not tallied all the votes. But as you are listening to it, the votes have been tallied for I Love the 70s. Stay tuned to our social media feeds to find out which entry we are visiting first for the countdown of your favorite horror films of the 1970s. And thank you for coming along with us on this journey. If you enjoyed this journey, then stay tuned after we catalog the 70s, because we'll be going right back into it again. So, Nathan, Man, this was a delight.
What sucks the most about this podcast conversation ending is that it's 1:30 Eastern Standard Time, and I really want to start Dark Season 2. And there's just no way I can make that happen.
I know. Oh man. Well, thank you again for inviting me, compelling me into this show, and I'm excited to see what happens next.
Yeah, so. It's going to be exciting. Well, we look forward to embarking into the 70s next week as the Bee Gees take over for about 4 episodes. Happy Halloween, comfort in the creepy, y'all. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys. The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but not the end of the conversation. And you can continue the conversation in a variety of ways. You can follow us on Twitter @TheFearOfGod. You can like and follow us on Facebook, or join the Facebook Fear of God discussion group. You can follow us on Instagram @Fear of God Podcast, or go to morethanonelesson.com to leave a comment on this post or any of the other official episode posts. Email us at fearofgodpodcast@gmail.com. Our theme music was composed by Lee Wright and Reed Lackey, and our podcast art was crafted by Jacob Hunt of jacobhuntcomics.com. Merchandise for the show can now be found at tpublic.com. Just search for The Fear of God Podcast, all one word. And last but not least, if you listen to us through iTunes, we would greatly appreciate a rating or a review. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.